Hello, everyone. My name's Tina Perinotto and I'm editor of The Fifth Estate. And with me today, I've got Shaun Carter, who had a fabulous event just recently to celebrate how many years in business?
21 years.
21 years, that's amazing. I think 10 is the one where everyone fails, but so you're double.
Well, I think 4 out of 5 businesses have failed by the time they're 5 years into that venture. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So to get to 21, that feels at least a marathon.
That's fantastic.
Or a half a marathon, as it might be.
Yeah. That's great. So, Shaun, your partner, who I've never met your partner. So it's Carter Williamson. What's your partner's name?
Oh, so business partner, Ben Peake.
Ben Peake.
Yeah.
Oh, very good.
My life partner, my wife, was also there. She's the Williamson.
Oh, okay. So the business is named after you and your wife.
I stole her name a long time ago, and that might have been part of a thinking, but that never eventuated. And
that
had really been the Carter of the Williamson. But I mean, in saying that, I mean, as you know, with life partners, that they're always there for wise counsel and sage advice. So I think Anna's.
So she is an essential part of the business in one way or another. Is she an architect too?
She is an architect, but she works in development and has done for almost the entire time of Carter Williamson. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, and you were also celebrating a nice win over a DA that you got.
Well, so 2 things,
latest is in your work. And also, perhaps to explain to us and the listeners what kind of work you specialise in.
We would say that we specialise in living, so designing buildings for people to live in. It's not all we do, but it's mostly what we do. So we design houses for people to live in, and whether they're a big freestanding home or a home that's attached to others, in that sort of general class 1 kind of understanding.
Yeah.
All the way up to lots of small homes in big buildings, which are called apartment buildings. So that would be the majority of our work, I dare say. We do public work. We design public buildings for state and local government, and we do commercial buildings. We design businesses and food and beverage outlets for commercial clients.
Oh, very good. So what are some of the highlights that you've done recently that are actually completed and that people might know? That what are the sorts of some of the projects that you're particularly proud of?
Oh, the 2 or 3 big highlights, I guess, in the last 18 months was winning the design competition for Chatswood. So that was 2 residential towers sitting on a 5,000 square metre commercial podium in a site in Chatswood near the rail station, one of the Todd sites. So that was wonderful. And then since winning that competition, we've produced the development application, or what's called a SSDA, a State Significant Development Application, that's gone into the department and has also come out. So on the same day that was approved, we also heard that we had won another design competition that we'd entered, which was a 55-storey apartment building in Parramatta on the river. Oh,
right. They're the 2 that you were particularly celebrating on the night the other day.
That's it. We mentioned those. Not long after doing the SSDA, we also did another wonderful project with a wonderful group of architects for a development in Concord. It's called Concord Central. And that was a Bill Bergier project, and there was 8 buildings and 4 architects. We were one of 4 architects with Group GSA, Fitzpatrick and Partners, and Lachlan Sager Architects, and Carter Williamson. So we all designed 2 apartment buildings as part of that 8 apartment building complex.
That's an interesting way to do it. I like it. It's always creates more interest and variation in the project, doesn't it?
Yeah, and to be fair, it's required by the government architect and the Planning New South Wales, or what's now known as DFI. So they needed to have architects that could achieve design excellence, and roughly an architect every 2 buildings. So that's how that project developed. And I have to say, it was wonderful collaborating with those 4 architects. McGregor Coxall was the landscape architect, and was great working with Phil and Anne and the team. So that way of that city making way of designing big parts of the city really quickly was a really wonderful experience for us. Was a committed client, a committed process, and so we've really enjoyed that. So that that this has been part of the last 2 or 3 years of Carter Williamson's practice, really designing these fairly sizable apartment buildings and becoming quite good at it.
That's fantastic. So you've gone from the smaller residential projects, jumping straight to the big end by the sounds of it. I mean, 55 stories, that's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. When I did an engineering degree before I got into architecture. And
marvellous. That's good to hear. I think the engineers would be glad to hear that.
Yeah. I was going to be a bit cheeky there, but I won't. But so what the subjects I really liked in engineering were dynamic of structures and understanding how tall buildings work dynamically.
Yeah.
Because the buildings don't just sit there, they move around quite a bit. So how do you
move around in the wind and stuff?
In the wind, yeah.
Okay.
Once you get over a certain height,
an earthquake,
the wind and the earthquake loads become quite determinative of the outcome. Buildings also have a tendency to move between that 4 to 8 hertz range, which is that sweet spot of car sickness.
What's the hertz measure? What's that?
That's a frequency that the human body doesn't particularly love.
Oh, that's what makes you seasick and car sick.
Car sick, all that motion sickness, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Is that something to do with the degrees of movement from the horizontal?
I think it's to do with how slender the buildings are, and how stiff they are, and how that engages with things like wind, and the way they tend to. It's like if you get a ruler or a piece of paper and hold it up in the breeze, so they'll move differently depending on how stiff the paper is and how strong the breeze is. So anyway, so all of those things have been really wonderful to think about and to design.
Yeah, that sounds really complex. So I'd like to hear more about that. Then maybe we'll scoot through a few things and then come back to this. I'd love to hear more about, what you're thinking. And actually, why not now? How do you move from, doing small scale to these big scales? How do you transition to that extent?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. The simple answer is we've been transitioning for a long time. It's just that we've not had much to really publish outwardly through our PR and media and marketing. We haven't really been putting out all the apartment buildings that we've been designing. Those sort of projects take a lot to get off the ground, but those that work in the space would understand that apartment buildings are bigger things. Not all of them tend to go through. Sometimes you get approval for them and they don't happen. So we've been really working this space for definitely 10 years, but maybe over the span of 15 years. So by the time, the media comes out that we've won a 33 and a 23-story tower sitting on a podium, we've been building up to that scale for quite a while. Right. So that's one way to think about it. Another way is that everyone lives in their own home within a certain sort of way, and that's something we've spent a long time considering. So when you get to doing a bigger building, thinking about how you live specifically in your home within a building full of many homes, that's not a lot different to how you think about it's just another layer or two in the onion, that how you think about how people live in homes. So you want a really good front door to the street, and we spent a long time thinking about what does our front door look like to the street in an apartment building. How do you make a really beautiful entry to an apartment building? How do you then make that next layer of connection from your front door where you walk into the building, you take your lift to your floor? What does that foyer look like when you arrive into your home? And so we like to make little sort of thresholds of front doors within the corridor in which you live, and make sure that corridor's supported with amenities. So you've got at least one window that's got a window on the external surface of the building, so that's getting lots of natural light. So thinking about those amenity things, and more broadly, I think we had this conversation in the office that if you're always concerned about the quality of amenity your building gets, or the amenity you want to give the people living in your building, that each one of those different thresholds, the the front door at the street, the foyer at the elevator, the other end of that foyer when you get to your floor, all those other transitional spaces that you go through, you want to make that as good as the space you're going to walk into, which will be your home. So in many ways, doing that scale transition has been a perfectly natural thing and something like it's felt like we've always been thinking about and always been doing. So when you get it, there's a little bit more complexity. There's another layer to it, but it's not completely different to what we've been doing all.
Yeah, but okay, but there's a big difference in terms of the materials used, the quantity of them. I mean, from the sustainability point of view, it's pretty big, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's fascinating, and we're doing a lot of work in the studio at the moment around sustainability, not only for necessary components of our QMS, but also for the things we fundamentally believe in. And around that conversation, how do you lead in sustainability when you're we're an important consultant in a big team in a big building, but we're not the lead. So how do you do that leadership thing and bring people along with you? So they're really important conversations. Recently, we teamed up with these wonderful consultants out of Melbourne called Finding Infinity.
Oh, we know them, of course.
Yeah, and then
Ross Harding, who's famous.
Yes. So how you can then put propositions. So this competition we just won in Parramatta, we work with Finding Infinity, Land and Form, Prison Facades, Choi Render, a whole bunch of people. But the sustainability thing and what we loved about Will and the team is that there's a cost-benefit analysis that goes with it. And there's the business as usual case, and then there's the stretch target, what happens if you do everything, and what happens if you spend a reasonable sum of money, and what's the payback period. And what was really surprising working with the Finding Infinity guys is that payback period is actually, the benefits are huge and the payback period's short. So the cost of, I guess the question for us is the real cost of not acting is now, I think, costing our clients money and position in the marketplace. So
that's interesting. Yeah. So what would you define? I mean, what are the sustainability elements that you've been able to integrate into those projects, or just Parramatta by the sounds of it? We're talking about Parramatta to begin with.
Yeah, well, that's the first time we worked with Will and the team in Finding Infinity. We looked at
who's Will, by the way. I know Ross Harding. Who's Will?
It's one of the team members of.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So we looked at it through four prisms, which was design and what you could do there. There was constructional energy and what you could do there. There was operational energy and what you could do there. And there was a fourth component that I'm running off memory here, and I can't exactly remember what that is.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting that through those four different points of view within the design and construction of a building, that you could make significant carbon savings, and that I think the payback period for this building was about 2.7 or 3.4 years.
Oh, wow. So that's on top of what the building would have looked like without any sustainability integrations.
Yep.
That's incredible. Yeah. Okay, so who's the client there?
The client is someone, we joke that his name's Ray. Ray's sort of the Kaiser Sose of development. Ray likes to fly under the radar and not necessarily be.
Oh, okay. So it's a client there. Tell me how many of those elements were you able to get the client to go with, and what convinced them to go with you on your wins, and what did they say no to?
So we're not yet at that stage. So we're just in the process of negotiating. So we won a competition, and that competition gives you the permission to design the building for the SSDA. So we're just about to start that SSDA process.
Oh, okay. So that's still in train. Okay. So, and do you expect the client will want to go with those elements?
I think the case is so compelling to go with those elements. I don't know how you can't not do it.
And what do you tell them is the cost of not doing it?
No, well, Finding Infinity have highlighted the actual cost, the physical cost. I think it was something like 4.4 million. But that might be viewed in the prism of or through the context of a budget that might be more like 300 million.
That's the cost of going ahead with those elements.
The going ahead with the targeted elements that Finding Infinity have put in place. But then the upside of that, and so the thing you can't necessarily know, although I suspect it's factored into the cost-benefit ratio a little bit, is the added glow you get for your building to be more sustainable and more green, more climate-friendly than all the other product out there. So we know in Parramatta there's lots of apartment buildings being built or being approved to be built. I don't see a lot of them doing anything over and above their basic requirements. And I guess what Ross, Will and the team do is they come up with reasons to do things above and beyond your basics requirement and the benefits of doing those things and how not only do in the long run you save money, but you add a luster to the building. So Chatswood's a big city. It's going to become increasingly a more professional and considered market. People will be buying into that market, wanting to have their building to be the most climate sensitive. And I think this is that potential that developers have to be able to sell their apartments at a higher price.
Very good. So, okay, that's interesting. So can you tell us about the client there, or are they also fairly quiet?
On the same client. It's the Parramatta client. Look, they're definitely interested in positioning themselves as unique in the marketplace. So I think when we sit down with Ray and the team, that they'll be interested in going ahead with these items. Certainly that.
Yeah. So the SSD, you've got through the SSD project process.
No, this is the Parramatta one. This gives us permission to do the SSD process. Chatswood's a bit different because whilst we had a general ESD approach, we didn't have it as targeted as Finding Infinity. So by the time we'd worked with the Finding Infinity guys, we were 5 months into our 6-month process with DeFi approving the building. So now at the other side. So hopefully we'll be in a position to negotiate that to start the construction docs for that Chatswood building. And it'd be good to start doing some thinking around what we did in Parramatta and what we can bring across to Chatswood.
Okay, so that's all additionality, isn't it, that you can add to the building that's already been approved through the process, but now you've got to actually design the details. Is that right? Or how much detail does it get when you go into the SSD process?
Well, to go into the construction document phase, so I forget how big the package was. You know, it was hundreds of drawings that you lodged for the DA for Chatswood, but the construction docs we think are going to be in the range of 700 to 1,000 A1 pages.
Oh my God.
So
okay.
So lots of detail. It's a long time.
Yeah,
it's a lot of people over a long period of time doing a lot of work.
Yeah. So I heard that project in Chatswood took 10 years to really get to this stage.
Yeah, everything takes a long time to get to the position where they're ready to launch. So
yeah, I was quite shocked by that. I didn't think it was that long. I kind of expected 5 years easily.
Well, when you have to amalgamate sites, so the amalgamation of the sites takes a long time. Because often you don't buy them all in one line. You've got to wait for availability. Sometimes some want to sell and some don't want to sell, but the selling of some sites lead to the selling of other sites. And then so once you acquire it, then you've got to go down if the planning regime is not in place, you go down the path of a planning proposal. Planning proposals generally take, in this city, 18 to 24 months. Part of that process, you come out the other side of a planning proposal. Then you do a design competition. That's going to add about another 12 months. And then once you get the competition run and done, then that's when you can start the process doing an SSDA.
Yeah. So the design competition, is that mandatory for that scale of building?
It's in Willoughby Council, it was, yes.
Okay. Not every council has that, though. Yeah.
Look, there's a lot of upside for design competitions, particularly where they encourage new authors of work. It just broadens the field and the experience, though.
Okay, that's really good. I was wondering if you could perhaps talk a bit about, what's going on in sustainability generally and the push, for architects to design better, more sustainable buildings. And, how much power do you have to convince the client? I'm really interested in that question of how you bring clients along, because they're the ones with the money. They're going to pay for it or not pay for it. So, what's the process like for that?
Again, another great question, Tina. What power do you have? That we're unsure.
That's pretty honest, I think.
Yeah. So we've got these ambitions. What we are at Carter Williamson is we're friendly and easy to work with. So we will always tell you our point of view. We're not paying for the building, nor are the client, and so the client will have a response to that. So I think things that are really helpful are the cost-benefit analysis. If you do this, it'll cost you that. You get that money back in 2.7 years, but you may sell an apartment for $20,000 more on average because you've got this environmental initiative. That seems like a really good selling point to me. So that's certainly the arguments we'll be taking to our clients for our buildings. The broader question: what agency do architects have in the profession around leading that conversation?
Definitely.
So there's the one that we have, which is, these great ideas. We think it's a cost benefit to you. Here's the analysis. We think you should do it, and these are the reasons why. There's a broader thing about where we see the carbon eventuating in our profession and through the processes we're involved in. I think Rod Simpson, which no doubt you've spoken to at length in your paper and on these podcasts, Rod's got he's a great thinker of climate change and carbon in our profession. And Rod quite rightly identifies that a lot of the big gains to be made in the construction industry is on the supply side. So if we can have a low carbon concrete or a green steel, or timber that comes from renewable resources, all these things that have this. In our studio we call it the provenance of materials, where they come from and what are the qualities they have. So when you go to a Neil Perry restaurant, the first page he tells you where the fish has come from and who's the person that catches the fish and prepares it, and where his beef comes from and where his lamb comes from. And so that idea of provenance of your key ingredients into what you then design and make, I think is something that's applicable to what we do here in architecture. So understanding those supply side things, what are readily available, sensible economic things that we can adopt with the building that can massively reduce our carbon, but also help with the cost benefit of the project. So supply side's one thing. I think then there's the design approach to how you look at buildings.
Yeah. How do you find as an architect that the world has changed to make it easier for you? Is it becoming easier for you to source those sustainable materials on the supply side? Is your job, as on the sustainability side, is it becoming easier? How are you finding it are you still finding it as a challenge? Because, how do you source that material? How do you guarantee that it's okay? What do you think about the resources that have been bubbling along? And there's a whole lot of competing one. I can see, different ways to rate the embodied carbon of materials and,
everything is easier these days more generally around climate science and climate change. I think the sensible centre of the country, which is the vast majority, I even think we saw a repudiation of an anti-science climate position at the last federal election.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
So I generally think that climate science is accepted. There's an understanding that we need to act. I also think increasingly we understand that Australia's doing okay, that we do get it and we are making, I think, good strides towards a low carbon future. You just see with the adoption of the batteries and the PV cells from that government initiative that was effectively, all that funding was used before the first 12 months of that 5-year phase, and they introduced a new bunch of funding so that initiative can keep on rolling out. I think Australians are really pragmatic people. They understand when the need to act, when it arrives, and then what you need to do to get there. So I think government support in those processes and so good regulation. I'm not saying more regulation, but good regulation that helps people achieve what they want to achieve is really needed and useful in our industry, like every other industry. So more broadly, I think it's much easier or gets easier by the day. Last Thursday we had a rain event that dropped 100 mils in 3 hours. That used to be a really uncommon thing. Now that seems to happen 3 or 4 times a year in Sydney. We had the extreme heat of December and January, followed by some big rains. Our weather is becoming increasingly unpredictable. I think we understand that climate change has happened.
Yeah. That's a big impost on the architects, isn't it, and the engineers to deal with that?
I think what we're doing is on the fly, we're changing how we design things. So flooding will occur, and most everywhere. So, flat thresholds and how you think about those, insulating your...
I don't really have flat buildings anymore. What about roof gardens? Gone.
Roof gardens are also a great insulator, so...
Oh, that's true. But what happens when it floods and when the membranes don't hold?
Well, you've got to drain it. So I've seen compliant flashing details fail in this extreme weather, where through capillary action and strong wind, water flows uphill.
Yeah. You've told me about this before. Yeah. That's amazing.
So I think we have to rethink our flashing details. There's just a lot of rethinking of thresholds and flashing details and insulating your shell of your building.
Yeah. So is there sort of a central place where you can source that kind of information that people have analysed and said this is the way it should work these days? Where are the...
No, I wouldn't say a central place, but architecture these days is a much more collegiate profession. Architects share knowledge. Clients and consultants share knowledge. People tell you pretty quickly who's a good consultant with some of these things, and you track them down and you stick to work for them or work with them. So I'd say the industry is getting quite good at. Look, I'm always a glass half full person, so I always expect a little bit of struggle with everything we do. But if you can find the right people and they're good, you just continue to work with them because that makes your life easier.
Are there some outcomes that you would like to see happen in the profession that would just consolidate some of the changes that need to be made and how they should be made? Would you like to see a kind of more formal, or is it not possible? I mean, we all go to AI now. I still go to Wikipedia to get verifiable information. Yeah. Is there something that you'd like to see?
Well, I mean, I guess they talk about us being in a post-truth world, but the reality is a building is a very pragmatic thing. Like it either does or it doesn't leak. There's no alternative facts about whether a building is or isn't leaking, or whether a building is or isn't insulated, or a building is or isn't getting light. These are solid, verifiable things. So I think our industry is pretty pragmatic. It also, I think, is accepted where it is and where it needs to go, and I think generally it's moving in that direction. The pace of change is a broader conversations we need to have. Again, I think that quite sensibly needs to be done by state and federal governments, and to a lesser degree local government. But I think humans, my general view of people is that we're very good at acting in a crisis, and we will make change. I mean, look what we did through COVID. That was there was a general goodwill in society where everyone acted together, and we had significant change really quickly, and we in Australia anyway, averted a disaster. So I think as we approach that crisis time, which feels like it's impending, we'll make even faster strides to do whatever we can to solve buildings. What I would say as well, we've got to be careful of fads, and there's all sorts of popular things that that you can't build buildings out of concrete. They've all got to be timber, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that, and all that sort of stuff. Life cycle cost analysis, where you look through the prism of the four critical things of cost or the financial model, the social model, the environmental model, and I don't know why this one's slipped out of my mind. Social, cultural, environmental, and
economic.
Yeah. If you look through those four prisms, and you do your economic analysis, and it's not for like designing the Chatswood apartment towers, we imagine they're going to be there for hundreds of years. So what is the embodied carbon per person amortized over 100 years or 150 years? And that's a really important thing to understand. And then what if we got a low carbon concrete? What is the benefit of that? Not only through the constructional process, but the long-term benefits socially. I think all that analysis where we don't just go for headlines, but we go for the more nuanced understanding of exactly what we're going to do. Just thinking about what if we design kitchens that weren't designed to last for 10 years, but they lasted for 15.
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing you're looking at in that apartment.
Look, I think all good design inadvertently is always doing things that if it's planned well and it functions well, and there's an ability to take things in and out as technology changes. You think dishwashers, fridge, switches, light points, if that's easy to then change about, well, then the inherent planning of the building is the inherent planning of the building. And I think there's almost an inbuilt obsolescence in our thinking that every 10 or 15 years, you got to redo your kitchen. What if you were just putting a different front on the kitchen? So the plan, the carcasses, the bench top inherently stayed the same, just a surface finish changed. Or what if it was so good and first up it didn't need to change and it lasted for 30 years till it fatigued?
Well, you get some very ancient kitchens and bench tops in Europe, for instance, that have been there for several hundred years.
Right. So, and that's a cultural thing as much as a design thing, that we've got to think that, if it's designed well and we put the effort in at the get-go, then maybe we're not replacing those things as often as we are now.
Do you get much of a chance to inform your clients about this and help shift that cultural perception or framing?
We're pretty chatty, so we're always telling our clients the things we're thinking. And I also think that the clients we're working with are thinking about the quality of the design. So inherently, if we can use a product that's got a greater longevity or a design that inherently has a greater longevity, well, then I think, even in a very passive way, we are inherently sewing in, the ability to hang on to your kitchen longer or your bathroom longer because it looks good, it functions well now, it'll still function well in 30 years' time.
Does it resonate with them?
Does it resonate? So we've got to understand developers we ask them to take on this massive financial risk to be able to design and build a building on the hope that they'll be able to sell it and make a buck. So that doesn't always work. I mean,
no, it's not an easy job for developers. I think they're half gamblers, really, and they're risking everything. I don't know how they do it, because I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I have a lot of time for. I do totally get that. But I was at an event end of last year with a whole lot of developers. It was kind of a fancy kind of company that was spruiking its materials and stuff, so they had very fancy lunch, but the discussion on the panel was all about sustainability. And they had that Danish architect here whose name has escaped me, but, he said, he's a developer and an architect, and he says, we don't do anything that isn't net zero, that's just our standard, So the developers around the table were going, it's all very easy for them. They can have smaller windows because it's cold, so they have to, so it's easier to achieve, more sustainable buildings.
There's
because of the need.
Well, different jurisdictions will have different stimulus. So what I can tell you here is there's lots of thinking about the ratio of glazed area to solid area in an apartment building.
Go on, tell me about that one.
Well, I think the sweet spot's 25% of glazed area to your floor area.
So that's the sweet spot now. What did it used to be? Did people
I don't know what it used to be.
Window?
I only know what we know now.
Okay.
And so then you've got to design a building. So Carter Williamson likes more solid in buildings rather than more glass. I think what we've traditionally done in Sydney is throw glass at it, particularly if there's a view.
The office buildings demand it.
Well, office buildings are a bit different. I'm talking about homes for living.
Yeah, but in homes, I'm wondering.
Well, you've got to hang up your artwork, your pictures, all the things that make home a home. Where do you put your piece of sculpture? Where do you put your hat stand? Where do you put, the pictures of the family or the piece of art that you own? They all go on walls. You don't pin them on glass. Yeah. TVs generally sit against walls, not glass, all those sort of things. So there's lots of sensible reasons why. So we find that if we sit there and design a building that we think has good apartments, and if we look at those apartments, that ratio almost always floats somewhere between sort of low 20s to 30% worth of glaze.
Yeah. Are you putting in low E glass and things like that to create better thermal properties?
The basics requires you to do really good glass. Okay. And depending on where you are in the orientation, depending on your glass specification. That said, I do know that double glazing is becoming almost de rigueur in buildings. The other interesting thing, Tina, and this is we design beautiful homes, and we also design. I've
seen the brochures; they're beautiful. Yes,
and we also design these really beautiful apartments we call homes. The requirement that we have to. Well, through regulation, the requirements we need for an apartment building in terms of the quality of that external shell, the envelope of the building, is so much higher in an apartment building. Like the level of detail and regulation is so much higher in apartment buildings. It was really quite surprising. So we're designing. When we're designing a building, our walls are somewhere between 450 and 500 thick.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So that's an apartment building. So when we're designing our home, we're thinking 270, 300 mils, maybe 270, 350.
That's still pretty thick, isn't it?
Well, 270 is a standard cavity brick wall, and we would insulate that cavity if it's full brick. So, we're getting R values that are exceeding the basics control. But if we look at the quality of the facades we're doing for apartment buildings, there's much greater focus on that. And I reckon the performance of an apartment building facade that we're doing is significantly greater than a house facade.
Yeah. And I suppose it's taller, it's more significant, bigger investment. I don't know, all that comes into it, I guess.
Your load's bigger, so your wind loads is quite substantial. I mean, it's really difficult to stand on a balcony in Sydney after midday at 10 stories tall,
Yeah, I've heard it's all very well to have balconies up there, but you can't even open the windows. Tell me about you brought up the word regulation. We're having an event at the end of this month on the National Construction Code and a debate on it. So I was wondering, what your feelings are about the NCC and whether it needs significant, it's a big question, I know, but whatever, what are your sort of top of mind feelings about NCC and other rating tools too, by the way?
Yeah. Look, I've got lots of feelings about the NCC.
This is your chance to tell the world.
Right. We do a little bit of legal work at Carter Williamson at the Land Environment Court, I can't tell you how many times local government put into their conditions, you've got to comply with the BCA. And look, I love the name BCA, Building Code of Australia, but we haven't used that since, I think, 2011.
And they're still asking for the BCA.
And they're still writing BCA. It should be the NCC. But anyway, National Construction Code is also a good name. What we've seen over a long period of time is, I think, a bit of silliness that has come into the NCC. I'm not sure how ventilation works and works properly for, particularly if we think class 1 buildings and, you know, windows can't open more than 125 mils unless they're 1,700 off the ground. I think that fails the ventilation standard, always. Tactile indicators, I think, are much more a trip hazard than they are of a benefit. I may be wrong there.
That happened to someone the other day in the papers, and he's got lifelong injuries.
My great concern is that the NCC board and I imagine their committees that give them advice, I wonder if they've been captured by some vested interest groups around some of the silly stuff. But like planning, sometimes I think we sweat the small stuff and we miss the big stuff. You know, in Sydney, in a planning sense, we are obsessed with height and yet not obsessed with deep soil and landscape area. And yet we talk about climate resilience. And if we're not going for a 30 to 40% urban tree canopy, we're not going for 15% plus for deep soil in our developments, well, then we're not going to get a resilient built environment. But we'll forgive that because we don't want to see something at 3 stories. We need to see it at 2, or we can't see it at 15 stories. We have to see it at 10. So we're preferencing fatter buildings rather than thinner, taller buildings that have better performance. In an NCC sense, I think that's also true. You know, what is it that we need to have that makes our buildings safe and secure and watertight and structurally sound? That needs to be an overarching objective. But what is it that needs to be in the NCC that coordinates it with every Australian standard that we have, so that there's not something in the NCC that is in direct conflict with an Australian standard? I think that's a great body of work. So,
is that happening? Does that happen then?
Well, look, I don't know. I'm not on any committee, but I can tell you now ventilation is a real issue with the NCC. I doubt it works. Because we've been preferencing safety over ventilation in the ventilation control. So, I think what happens when you do things piecemeal and you don't sit there and have a root and branch review, say every 10 years, I think you get these sort of things happening with any national standard. So, if I was to provide any advice, and I know the state and federal government have paused the NCC upgrades. What I would be saying is you need a committee that's reviewing, a technical committee that's reviewing every Australian standard and making sure whatever's in the NCC correlates with that. There shouldn't be any conflict, and one should not be wrestling with the other.
So you're in favour of that pause so that they can look at everything again?
I think I'm in favour of the pause so they can stop we should stop knee-jerk reactions, I think. And we've got to understand that if we bring a change to the NCC, well, how does that play out? Not only tomorrow, not only in a year's time, but in 20 years' time or 30 years' time. Because remember, whatever version of the NCC we're working on today, that'll still be in play in 30 or 40 years' time because that building will be built. So we have to have sensible understanding of what it is we're writing in there and how it comes to effect. So that as a piece of regulation is good. And earlier on in this conversation, I mentioned the word good regulation. So I think there's a propensity for government at all tiers, local, state, federal, to produce regulation, because regulation is the way to understand how you are doing things. It's the business of government. I think a broader piece of work that needs to be done is what is the quality of that regulation? And how does that play out? So I would use this pause in the NCC to do that root and branch review. What is it that we really need? Where are the conflicts and how do we remove them? how do we include the really practical stuff? And then how do we lead on the important issues that we have today? So climate change for me is the issue of our time.
So that's insulation, weatherproof, tree canopy, good glazing, I guess.
I think you've got to go all the way. There's a wonderful landscape architect, Libby Gallagher, who's doing some really wonderful work on contiguous deep soils in Western Sydney. So all the way out to landscape work and how do we build a really resilient landscape? How does that intersect with country, and how do we sow those really important cultural things into our practice while we're doing the environmental things? But then bring it all the way through to supply side processes. Can we make regulation that can help steel become green, or carbon become lower concrete, or timber to become sustainable? What are the things we can do through there? And you do that all the way through to the document itself. And then that document is the piece of regulation that once in practice, it drives change. And we know with government policy now, there's what they do if they're going to bring something new in, they'll test it. They'll find a fairly captive jurisdiction, and then they'll roll out that piece of legislation, test it first to find what are the good effects, but what are the bad effects? What are the deleterious effects? You always hear that saying, what are the unintended consequences of a regulation? Well, these days with AI and market testing, we can understand what some of the bad effects are going to be, and we can seek to change those, or at least to have a better version of regulation. So I'd be more in favour of less change, but more understanding when we do change things, what are we going to get?
Yeah. As long as it's not a RIS, regulatory impact statement, which I'm told, usually costs about $100,000 to hire some economists to work out the cost-benefit analysis.
Well,
that's what I'm told has been one of the reasons that,
that may be, with just the window regulation, for example.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
If you got that, if you got the ventilation right, maybe you use the air conditioner 25% less, which means that 100,000 worth of that economic analysis pales to insignificance when you measure against the input cost that the average family has to do. And there might be 300 average families in a building, and because their building doesn't ventilate properly, that building is using 20% more power than they need to. Then I think they're massive effects of what?
Yeah. When they're taken at scale, that's a good idea. What would your solution be to safety and ventilation in windows? What would you do?
I'm a big fan of a bit of common sense. We know we've got a balustrade control. I think the balustrade height is too low, by the way. I think it should be 1,100. But
wow, what is it at the moment? 750 or something?
No, a metre.
1 metre. Yeah. So another 100.
Well, I'm not very tall, and my pivot point's around a metre. So if I slip and fall towards the balcony, there's a chance that I'm probably going to go over a compliant balcony. But I'm not going.
Wow.
I'm not going to go over 1,100 balcony.
Okay, interesting.
So,
yeah. And with windows, where with those minuscule openings, which I think.
Well, I think
there's other ways around it, isn't there?
Well, there's louvers, and people don't like to use louvers, and that is a way around it.
Well, there's bars, or the kind of thick wire that people use.
Don't have an opening below 1,100, and be a bit more relaxed about your openings above 1,100.
Okay, right.
If it's good enough for a balustrade, so if we can all stand on a balcony where a lot more of us are likely to be, and that height is 1,100, well then surely we're okay with standing in a bedroom next to a window that's open at 1,100 height.
Yeah.
The regulation, as I understand it, is to stop kids falling out windows, which I get.
Yeah.
And having had little ones, and you know the level of worry and anxiety that comes about that. You can understand why that's a real concern. But I also understand that I was part of the generation where, I was told to go outside and come back by dark as long as you're in the house, and we all survived. And
That's
So
right.
I think I think our level of anxiety around our children is probably because we all work too much.
Yep. Yep.
So
Okay. That's great.
I think we need to take a bit of a chill pill and let some common sense prevail and say, well, what is the governing factor around fall, and agree on a number that we all agree on. That if it's 1100, let's say it's 1100, and then say what's open above that we can be a bit more relaxed about, because then we're going to get a much better chance, because everyone's using these hopper windows. You know, they sort of pivot from the top. They're awning windows, and they opened at the bottom by 125 mils maximum. They open horizontally as opposed to vertically. I'm yet to see one of those windows that effectively works in allowing a room to ventilate. So, and then who's going to open a window above 1700? No one. I mean, my wife is 5 foot. She's never going to open a window above 1700. And then you've got to get on a ladder to do that. And then we know about slip and fall with ladders. I think that's more of a risk, not only through ventilation, but through accident than anything else. So being able to open a window sensibly at 1100, I think would be a much better, and that's just ventilation. So it's a bugbear, and you can see I've thought about it.
Yeah, I know it's a bugbear with a lot of people, and me too when I first heard about it, even though I don't have to deal with it directly. Now, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your background and how you got to become an architect.
Well, I always wanted to be an architect. I was the only kid at school that knew what he wanted to do, and I wanted to be an architect.
Where did you grow up, by the way? Where did you grow up?
In the Hills District. I went to Borkham Hills High. And so I remember saying to the careers teacher in year 9, she said, Shaun, what do you want to be? I said, I'm going to be an architect. And she said, she said to me, do you like driving taxis? Like, I'm in year 9, how would I know? But I said, no, I don't want to drive taxis. I want to be an architect. She goes, well, what I'm saying to you is if you become an architect, you'll end up driving taxis because there's no jobs for architects. So this is probably giving the game away, but this would have been about 84, 85.
Incredible advice.
And to be honest, I thought that was a lot of bunkum. But anyway, she worked on me for 2 years, and she encouraged me to go down the engineering path. She said, why don't you go and do industrial science? You know, if you like that, it's all the science and whatever. You can do engineering, and if you like that, you can then go to uni and study engineering, because, you know, as an engineer, you'll always have a job. So I did that. I ended up doing industrial science. You know, we built things and broke it for a young man who's, was then 16. Building things and breaking it seemed like a great thing to do. So then I enrolled in structural engineering at UTS. And when I left high school in 87, and I arrived at UTS Engineering School in 1988. And I remember the first class, level 19, it was a physics class, and I'm sitting there and I thought to myself, oh my God, what have I done? I've done the wrong thing. I don't want to be an engineer. I want to be an architect.
Wow.
But I was also a young man. I started uni when I was 17. I turned 18 in the April. And I was also keen to have a life. And having walked to my primary school and my high school all my life, to go into the city and to be with all these other exciting people, and there was a bar at university, all those things were a life that I really wanted to have. So I then spent the next 3 years having a great time. You know, I joke that I got a high distinction in university bar and socialization, and a conceded pass in engineering. So,
that's okay. Yeah, and then you switched, did you?
No. So 4 years in, I found travel. So then I started going to Europe and around the world. So I did that for 2 or 3 years. Then got back and got a proper job. I got a job in construction. No, firstly in consulting engineering with Conor Wagner. And then I got a job in construction with various construction companies. And then I remember waking up at about 25 and thinking, that girlfriend that I've had for about 18 months, and she's serious about her studies and she could become my wife. Maybe I should knuckle down and then finally grow up. So I think from that moment on, I've worked 60 hours a week, week out. So I did nothing for a long time, but have a good time. And then I've done lots of work since then.
Yeah.
And that path back to architecture was interesting. I was working in construction, and my wife was studying at Sydney University architecture, and she had this lecturer called Tone Wheeler, and Tone used to run.
Tone again.
Tone used to run these things called the Tone Tour, and he needed a bus driver, and he was doing this European tour. So I gave up my construction job to drive a bus with Tone and 16 other wonderful people around Europe. And in 28 days, we studied 66 buildings. And I was perhaps the best student on that tour. And I was just the bus driver. Like, mine was a paid gig. And that was perhaps one of the greatest things that I've ever done. And I'm forever grateful to Tone to have invited me along on that tour, and for him to share his knowledge and wisdom. And also, for the first 6 days of my career in architecture, was staying in was in and around buildings by Le Corbusier. So we had 2 nights at La Tourette. We slept there. We had a night at the Unité de Habitation in Marseille. That was extraordinary. We did the dawn pilgrimage up the hill to Ronchamp, and we spent the whole day there. The first thing I saw was the Villa Savoie, just outside of Paris, in a place called Poissy. And, that was a great journey back to architecture. So after that tour, Tone had just got into this thing called CAD, and I knew CAD, and he wanted to start CAD in his office and wanted to know if I wanted to join him. So I did. I grabbed that opportunity with both hands, and so I worked with Tone for 5 years before starting practice.
Right. You were studying in the meantime as well as working?
Well, no, I worked for Tone from 96, and I didn't go to uni till 99.
Yeah.
So, so I was, and then I started practice. So I was in second year when I started an architecture practice.
That's very ambitious, but then you had a lot of experience.
Well, so Dad was a builder as well, so I knew how to put buildings together. I'd been working on building sites my whole life. And I'd done engineering, so I knew how buildings worked. I just needed to, and I felt that I had a good sense of how to design them. But when standing in Corb's buildings, I realised they were extraordinary, but I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the intellectual framework to understand what it was I was seeing and feeling. So I knew I had to develop that understanding. So that was, and I got a great education. I went back to UTS for my architecture degree. I was very fortunate that I had Brett Boardman as a tutor. I had Kirsten Orr as the lecturer. I had Philip Salas as a lecturer, and Peter John Cantrell and Tony Caro. All these giants of the New South Wales architecture profession, and very much an urban design school. And I was fortunate that I got my education from those wonderful people then.
Where did the bug come from? Was it your father and being on building sites with
No,
it? Because I think
oddly enough, it was mum. So I was very much a mummy's boy, and I used to go walking. Mum walked all the time. So I'd go walking early morning with mum, and we were both up early, and we'd go and look at all these new housing estates, and she'd point out all the houses that she liked and why. And then to win her favour, I would come back and design these homes for her. So I was drawing house plans from the moment I can remember.
That's fantastic.
And Mum, look at this house, I've designed it for you, and this would be great, and we can do this. And that evolved into designing schools, because I was at school and I thought, shit, there's got to be a better design for schools. But anything that I was interested in, I was designing. So
that's fantastic.
And Dad and I would always have building projects in the backyard. So I got into Avery, so we'd make Averys, or I got into billy carts, and we made billy carts, or cricket, we'd make cricket pitches and bats and things. So there was the making side with Dad, and then there was the dreamy design side with Mum. So it was.
That's great. And so that's really lovely. Now, coming back to the present, let's look at the future. What are your dreams still to come in architecture? What would you like to achieve? Or getting these apartments finished sounds like priority.
Yeah, of course. Whenever you start a building, you want it finished. And it's also interesting to think about when you're at university and what your dreams are as a student. I think you have a head full of, these iconic individuals like Alto or Utzman or Korb or Khan, and you think you want to be like those people. Fast forward 25 years and you realise that's not how architecture is made. Architecture is made with lots of great minds working together. And what we do here at Carter Williamson, lots of great minds work together, but through a set of values that we have. So what I'd like to continue to do is to be able to sow those values into the buildings that we're designing. We know we're good at it. We're really good designers. We know that we're one of many good designers in this city and this country. So to be humble enough to know that you can always learn, but be ambitious enough to know that you can, through good intentions and a persuasive argument, you can help guide people in the right direction. So I think as long as we continue to do that, and really the buildings that you end up loving the most are the buildings that your clients love the most. We're in this phase at the moment where a lot of the homes we designed in 2007 and 2009 and 2011, those clients are coming back to us because life circumstances have changed, and they're asking us they love their homes so much they never want to leave, but they're asking us to adapt those homes to those new life circumstances. And that's a really lovely story. There's a lovely story arc that they so loved what we did and trusted us originally that they're trusting us again with the next phases of their lives as we make these homes fit for purpose for them in their whatever their current arrangements are. So this also makes me think, so we love the Institute Awards. That's the standard that always means that we've got to aim for design excellence. And that's the value of Carter Williamson. How do you always do the best design? I used to put a lot of weight on the awards, and we had to always win the awards and be that. And look, we're probably winning more awards now than we ever have, but our focus is not on that, but rather how do we maintain that standard? How do we prosecute the argument about design quality? And then the bigger picture of that is there's the Enduring Architecture Award. That's buildings over 25 years that we come back and look at and we acknowledge again. And that, for me, that award is the best award we have in architecture, because that says that those architects working on that building, designed a building that the people so loved that it's still around today, and it's still loved, and they're making best use of that building, because that's the best way we're going to lock up that carbon for as long as we possibly can. And that's all done through good design. Now, good design, the idea of that comes and goes depending on there's a time period, a fashion period with that. But in fundamental good design, a great plan, great amenity, durable materials, those things are objectively good, inherently good, and not needing of change. If we can do that and we can look back at a Carter Williamson building in 25 years or more and it's still there and people still love it, they want to be in it, I think that would be the aim of what we're trying to do now. How do we design that building into the future?
Very nice. Nicely said too. So, Shaun, I wanted to ask you about Passive House, what you think about it. There seems to be an uprising against it lately amongst architects.
Look, I find Passive House interesting. In some parts it feels almost cultish. And too often in the endeavours of life at the moment, it's binary. You're either Passive House and you're for it, and by corollary, if you're not for it, you're against it. We've designed a Passive House for a friend, and it was alterations addition, so that was really quite challenging. So it was interesting to think about what we're doing there in the prism of the values that we see buildings. I think in Sydney, to have leaky buildings or buildings that can get a great degree of natural cross-ventilation is a really healthy thing. Sydney's a benign climate. We should really embrace that. But Sydney also gets cold and it also gets very hot. So the more extremes there's certainly good aspects of passive house around insulation and controlling energy flows that I think are really important, as are there really good things around opening the whole house up, the more Glen, Rick and Stutch sort of stuff where you can have a house that fully breathes and fully opens up. So I think they both can coexist. I think there's very good things within the passive house around an insulated external shell. That HVAC system, I think, has got a lot to commend it for. My problem with some of the things I've seen around passive house, a bit like the early passive house designs, you saw the big skirting roofs and, we sort of threw design out the window and we just had the systems were the dominant thing. I think there's great things about passive house that we could actually incorporate in every building. This is kind of, this is like a beefed up sort of basics kind of way of thinking about a building. But equally, there's things that we do in with our architecture, particularly in a benign climate like Sydney, that I think are always really good to have and we should preserve. So I think the two things could coexist. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's somewhere in between. And that nuance, that critical thinking process to say, this is good from passive house, this is good from leaky house, let's put it all together, let's see what a really good performing healthy home is like, is I think the landing point of where that whole debate goes.
That sounds very sensible indeed. The sensible approach. Shaun, that's a lovely note to end on. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been lovely chatting.